Right now, as you watch this, the USS George H. Bush is cutting through the Arabian Sea toward the Strait of Hormuz. It sailed from Norfolk, Virginia. It navigated around the entire African continent. It passed the Strait of Gibraltar, and its course is now locked directly onto one of the narrowest, most contested, most strategically consequential stretches of water on the planet. On the other side of that same choke point, hundreds of Iranian speedboats are idling along a mountainous coastline. Engines warm, rocket launchers welded to their decks, radios open. And somewhere between those two converging forces, the world's most important energy corridor is being transformed from a shipping lane into the staging ground for the most consequential American naval operation in a generation. 2 aircraft carriers, over 15 warships, more than 10,000 sailors and Marines, Minesweepers racing west from Japan, Marine Expeditionary Units crossing the Pacific. This is not a drill. This is not a threat. This is the second wave of an active blockade, and it is forming right now. And the decisions made in these narrow waters over the next 72 hours could reshape the global energy order for the next decade. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because situations like this evolve by the hour, and you are going to want to be the first to know what happens next. To understand what is happening in the Strait today, you first need to understand how we got here. It begins on February 28, 2026, when the United States and Israel launched what President Trump described as major combat operations against Iran, initiating what the Pentagon later designated Operation Epic Fury. Iran's response was to weaponize its geography. Within days, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy began scattering naval mines across shipping lanes, deploying fast attack craft to harass merchant vessels, and by March 2nd had formally declared the Strait of Hormuz closed. Oil prices surged past $100 per barrel, a climb of more than 40% from the roughly $70 baseline where crude had been trading before the war. Shipping traffic collapsed from over 100 vessel transits per day to a trickle. A fragile ceasefire on April 8th broke down almost immediately when Iran began imposing tolls of more than $1 million per vessel, payable only in Chinese yuan or untraceable cryptocurrency, deliberately bypassing the American banking system. On April 11th, 2 American guided missile destroyers, the USS Frank E. Peterson Jr. and the USS Michael Murphy, transited the strait as a message. Iranian Revolutionary Guard naval elements attempted to swarm them within minutes. Washington did not blink. On April 12th, Trump announced on Truth Social that the United States Navy would begin blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. The blockade went live at 10 in the morning Eastern Time on April 13th. U.S. Central Command under CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper executed the first wave. In the first 24 hours of enforcement, according to CENTCOM, more than 10,000 U.S. sailors, Marines, and airmen, along with over a dozen warships and dozens of aircraft, were executing the blockade mission. 0 ships made it through. And now, with that first wave having proven the blockade's effectiveness, the second wave is arriving. Larger, more lethal, more determined. Now let us talk about what is actually moving into position, because the scale of the second wave is staggering. At the center of it is the USS George H. Bush aircraft carrier strike group. The Bush departed Norfolk, Virginia, navigated around the African continent to avoid the congested Mediterranean, past Gibraltar, and has now locked its course directly onto the Arabian Sea. It carries what amounts to the air force of a small country. More than 70 F/A-18 Super Hornet fighter jets, dozens of EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft, E-2 Hawkeye early warning platforms, MH-60 Seahawk helicopters, nearly 5,000 personnel. It is being positioned to operate in coordination with the USS Abraham Lincoln, which is already on station approximately 200 kilometers south of the Iranian coastline. 2 carrier strike groups, operating in coordination, within striking distance of every Iranian installation along the Hormuz approach. The carriers are not arriving alone. More than 15 advanced warships have been repositioned to the region, forming a layered maritime shield. Arleigh Burke class guided missile destroyers with their radars fixed on Iranian shores. Ticonderoga-class cruisers, amphibious assault ships carrying fully equipped Marines in their bellies, naval replenishment platforms that allow the entire force to remain at sea indefinitely. Then there are the Marines themselves. The 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, approximately 3,500 personnel, is already positioned in the Arabian Sea, backed by MV-22 Osprey tiltrotators, capable of inserting forces onto any coastal target within hours. The 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, an additional 2,500 personnel, is advancing from the Pacific. Together, these 2 units represent one of the largest American amphibious capabilities assembled in this theater in years. But perhaps the most telling element of this second wave is what is arriving beneath the waterline. U.S. minesweepers that departed American bases in Japan are racing westward through the Strait of Malacca, advancing toward the Middle East without slowing. P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft are conducting continuous overhead patrols, listening with AI-supported sonar systems for any acoustic anomaly in the shallow Gulf waters. This is a full-spectrum maritime operation, air, surface, subsurface, expeditionary, all converging on a single 21-mile-wide waterway. The early results tell the story before the second wave has even fully arrived. 10 commercial vessels attempting to reach Iranian ports have already been forced to divert and return. 2 Iranian crude oil tankers attempting to depart Chabahar were intercepted by the Arleigh Burke class destroyer USS Spruance. The Spruance contacted both vessels by radio and ordered them to return to port. The transmission was direct and uncompromising. The United States, the Spruance broadcast, had announced a formal blockade of Iranian ports and coastal areas, that the vessel's transit was illegal, and that any attempt to breach the blockade would be prevented. Both Iranian tankers complied. One crucial distinction in how the blockade is being enforced is that it does not target general commercial traffic in the Gulf. CENTCOM has been explicit. The blockade applies only to vessels entering or departing Iranian ports. Ships transiting the strait to non-Iranian ports, tankers heading to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, are not being impeded. This is not a closure of the waterway. It is a surgical economic strangulation of one actor. The message that sends to Iran is clear, and the message it sends to Beijing is even clearer. Now let us talk about what Washington is actually up against, because the Iranian response over the past 48 hours has visibly escalated. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy has spent decades designing a doctrine precisely for this scenario. The logic is brutally simple. You cannot defeat the United States Navy in open ocean combat. You can, however, harass it with a vast number of small, fast, and cheap assets, raising the cost of the operation until Washington's political and economic tolerance breaks. Global intelligence reports estimate between 600 and 800 Iranian speedboats are currently active in the Hormuz region. Boghammer-class armed boats carrying machine guns and rocket launchers are shadowing American destroyers at speeds of 40 to 50 knots. Ashura and Tandar-class attack craft, smaller, more agile, mass-produced, are specifically designed for coordinated swarm attacks. You saw a preview of this doctrine on April 11th, when Iranian naval elements attempted to swarm the Peterson and Murphy. Sharp, threatening radio warnings were broadcast to the American vessels. The U.S. ships maintained their course. The attempted swarm failed. But what happened on April 11th was an opening move. The full doctrine has not yet been tested, and Iran is not limiting its risk strategy to the surface. According to regional intelligence reporting, more than 200 active surveillance and attack drones are currently operating in the Hormuz region. Shahed 136 kamikaze variants, Mohajer 6 and Mohajer 10 long-range surveillance platforms. Small FPV suicide drones designed for single-target attacks on high-value assets. These are not used solely for reconnaissance. They have coordinated swarm attack capabilities, and they are being positioned as a war of attrition tool designed to deplete the United States' expensive defensive missile stockpiles. That is the single greatest risk factor this second wave faces. Every Aegis interceptor missile costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. Every Patriot round costs hundreds of thousands more. A kamikaze drone costs a few $1,000s. A speedboat, tens of thousands. The mathematics of attrition, when you play it out across a contested waterway over a sustained operation, is the one equation that favors Tehran. But beneath the waters of Hormuz, the picture grows darker still. According to Reuters reporting, the Revolutionary Guards have laid a substantial number of naval mines across the strait, with regional intelligence estimates placing the total in the thousands. These are not simple contact explosives. The Maham 3 type remains suspended in the water while moored, triggered the moment it detects the acoustic or magnetic signature of a passing ship. The Maham 7 sits on the seabed and detonates beneath ships, passing overhead in shallow waters. Moored contact mines detonate upon physical impact. And according to New York Times reporting, a significant portion of these mines have been caught in the Gulf's strong bottom currents and swept kilometers from their original positions. Their exact locations are impossible to pin down with certainty. In a waterway only 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, a single mine striking a billion-dollar destroyer hands Iran a propaganda victory it would exploit for years. Make sure you are subscribed, because what comes next reveals the specific scenario every American military planner in the region is wargaming right now, and why a single misjudgment in the next 72 hours could ignite something far beyond a naval standoff. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications right now. The American counter to Iran's asymmetric doctrine is already being positioned. CENTCOM has officially confirmed that the mine clearance operation in the strait has begun. Knifefish-class autonomous underwater drones are conducting sonar scans of the seabed, mapping mine positions in real time. Mark 18, Mod 2. Kingfish unmanned underwater vehicles are locating hidden explosives with their torpedo-shaped bodies. MH-60S Seahawk helicopters are sweeping for near-surface mines using airborne laser mine detection systems. When a mine is identified, Seafox expendable neutralizers come into play. These are small fiber-optic guided robotic systems that swim directly to the mine and destroy both themselves and the threat with a shaped charge. Each Seafox costs approximately $100,000. The mine it neutralizes may have cost Iran $2,000. That cost ratio, 50-1 in Iran's favor on every exchange, is precisely what the Revolutionary Guard's asymmetric doctrine is engineered to exploit. But the American response is not limited to mine clearance. FA-18 Super Hornets and EA-18G Growlers from the carrier strike groups are doubling air patrol density over the strait. The Growlers' electronic warfare capabilities have the potential to break coordination among Iranian speedboats by jamming their communication frequencies in real time. P-8 Poseidon aircraft provide continuous aerial surveillance, monitoring every Iranian vessel movement, every drone launch, every coastal battery position simultaneously. And then there are the A-10 Thunderbolt attack aircraft, the legendary Warthogs, veterans of countless conflicts, now flying at extremely low altitudes directly over the strait's surface. The 30mm GAU-8 Avenger cannon, mounted on each A-10, a weapon capable of firing thousands of rounds per minute, is perhaps the single most effective platform in the American arsenal for destroying Iran's fleet of fast attack speedboats before they can close to firing range. The A-10 is slow, it is loud, it is old, and it is exactly the weapon this scenario demands. Against Iranian coastal missile batteries hidden in the mountainous terrain of Bandar Abbas, Qeshm Island, and Hormuz Island, the United States has positioned B-52 Stratofortresses and B-1 Lancer bombers capable of striking inland command centers and launch sites. Iran's Noor anti-ship missiles, Chinese origin C-802 derivatives, with a range of 120 to 170 kilometers, can reach every inch of the strait's width, but they can only fire if their launchers remain functional, and those launchers are now under continuous surveillance by the most sophisticated reconnaissance architecture ever assembled in the region. And now we arrive at the scenario that has senior American military planners wargaming around the clock. What happens when Iran plays its doctrine in full? Not one speedboat, not one drone, the full swarm, more than 100 speedboats, a simultaneous drone saturation attack. Anti-ship missile salvos fired from coastal batteries in Bandar Abbas, Qeshm, and Hormuz Island all at once, in a single coordinated wave designed specifically to overwhelm the Aegis combat systems, the Patriot PAC-3 MSE batteries, the THAAD interceptors, and the NASAMS platforms defending the carrier strike groups. Iran's entire asymmetric doctrine was engineered for precisely this moment. The calculation in Tehran is that a saturation attack of sufficient density would force at least one successful hit, and a single successful hit, a drone striking a destroyer, a missile reaching a carrier's escort ring, a mine detonating against a hull, would transform the strategic picture overnight. The Revolutionary Guard has not yet played this card, but the forces to execute it are in position. The drones are ready, the mines are drifting, the speedboats are patrolling, and the first successful hit against an American ship in a 21-mile-wide channel would not just be a military event, it would be a political earthquake that would reverberate from Riyadh to Taipei. Every actor watching this confrontation, from Beijing's military planners calculating their own Taiwan timeline, to Moscow monitoring American resolve, to the Gulf Arab states weighing their alignment with Washington, is drawing conclusions in real time from what happens in these waters. And Washington knows it. That is why the second wave is this large. That is why the A-10s are flying this low. That is why 2 carrier strike groups, more than 15 warships, and the full minesweeping capability of the Pacific Fleet are converging on a single 21-mile channel. The Pentagon is not trying to survive an Iranian swarm. It is trying to deter one by making the mathematics of saturation impossible to close. Whether that deterrence holds depends on a single variable. Whether whoever now holds operational authority inside the Revolutionary Guard Navy believes the swarm can still succeed. If they do, the next 72 hours contain the possibility of the most dangerous naval clash of the 21st century. If they do not, the strait opens, the blockade holds, and Iran's asymmetric doctrine joins its underground missile doctrine in the category of strategic concepts that worked brilliantly until the moment they were tested against overwhelming force. And there is one more dimension to this second wave that most coverage is missing entirely. Washington's ultimate objective may not be the strait itself. It may be what lies beyond it. Karg Island, located roughly 30 kilometers off Iran's coast in the Persian Gulf, handles approximately 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. It is the single most important piece of economic infrastructure the Iranian regime possesses. Before this war, more than 90% of the oil leaving Carg was bound for China. That single flow represented the largest source of foreign revenue sustaining Iran's military budget. Every tanker departing Carg translated directly into drones, missiles, speedboats, and mines deployed to the front. The blockade of Iranian ports already severs that flow, but positioning 2 Marine Expeditionary Units within striking distance of the Iranian coastline opens a possibility that goes well beyond naval interdiction. President Trump told the Financial Times that Washington could take control of Iran's oil by occupying the island. The Pentagon has confirmed that A-10 Warthogs and Apache helicopters are already flying strike missions in and around Carg, softening Iranian defensive positions. The 82nd Airborne Division's Immediate Response Force, 2,000 paratroopers capable of deploying within 18 hours, has been moved to the region. The second wave of this blockade is not just a naval buildup, it is the infrastructure for every option Washington may yet choose to exercise. And the strategic logic behind that infrastructure is cold and clear. If the United States retreats from this position, if it yields to Iranian mine warfare, yuan-denominated toll collection, and swarm threats, the signal sent is global. China reads Hormuz as a rehearsal for Taiwan. Russia reads it as a measure of American resolve in Eastern Europe. The cost of backing down is denominated not just in barrels of oil, but in the credibility of American deterrence across every theater on Earth. That is why CENTCOM will not blink first. Here is where everything stands right now. The first wave of the blockade held for its first 24 hours. 0 ships breached it. The second wave, led by the USS George H. Bush, the USS Abraham Lincoln already on station, more than 15 additional warships, 2 Marine Expeditionary Units, and the full minesweeping capability of the Pacific Fleet, is now converging on the strait. Iran's asymmetric arsenal, 600 to 800 speedboats, more than 200 drones, thousands of naval mines, coastal missile batteries hidden in mountainous terrain, remains in place and on maximum combat alert. The American architecture to defeat that arsenal, A-10s hunting speedboats in real time, growlers jamming Iranian coordination, Poseidons tracking every surface and subsurface movement, knifefish drones mapping the minefield, Aegis and THAAD and Patriot batteries layered across the carrier strike groups, is also in place. The question is no longer whether the United States can enforce the blockade. The first 24 hours answered that question. The question now is whether Iran will accept the new reality, or whether it will play its asymmetric doctrine in full and test whether a saturation attack can still succeed against a force this concentrated. The next 72 hours will decide. The assumption that Iran could close the Strait of Hormuz and hold the global economy hostage defined Middle Eastern geopolitics for 3 decades. That assumption has been tested. It has been broken. The strait is being opened, not by Iranian permission, but by American force. Will Iran absorb that reality and negotiate from whatever leverage remains? Or will it gamble everything on a final asymmetric strike that could ignite the most dangerous naval clash of the 21st century? Will the swarm come? Will a single drone, a single mine, a single miscalculation in a 21-mile channel redraw the map of the global energy order? The forces to answer those questions are now in position on both sides. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications because we will be watching, we will be analyzing, and we will be here for every development in this critical situation. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand why the second wave of this blockade is the most consequential American naval operation in a generation and what it means for every economy connected to the global energy market. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Iran will accept the new reality of the strait, or will Tehran play its asymmetric doctrine in full and trigger the most dangerous escalation in a generation? We will see you in the next one.